My wife believed her best friend over me, divorced me without a question, but when the truth came out, I didn't beg, I did something that stunned her. That's how it ended, not with a fight, not with closure, but with a cold, quiet decision. I'm 35, live in Denver, and a few months ago I signed the final divorce papers. What destroyed my marriage wasn't infidelity, it was a lie. A lie told by someone who'd always hated me, whispered in the right ear at the worst possible time. My wife swallowed it whole, like gospel. She didn't ask, didn't argue, didn't even look me in the eye. She just packed a bag and said she needed space. Back then, I thought space meant hope, but space just meant silence, cold, crushing, final. And when the truth finally surfaced, when the real story unraveled and exposed everything, I didn't try to win her back. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. What I did was simple. I let her live with the consequences. I met Emma at a mutual friend's game night. She walked in wearing an oversized sweater, hair pulled back in a messy bun, eyes sharp and curious. She crushed everyone at Scrabble, didn't gloat, just smirked every time she laid down a word like quixotic or beguiled, and racked up triple points. I remember thinking, God, I want to know her brain. She laughed easily, listened deeply. She made you feel like the only person in the room. We ended up talking until 2 a.m. that night about childhood stories, bucket list cities, and favorite books. I left with her number and a spark I hadn't felt in years. Here, we started slow, coffee dates, weekend hikes, quiet dinners. There was something grounding about her. Emma wasn't loud or flashy, but she had this calm magnetism. She made my life feel less like a storm. I was 30 then, jaded from a string of shallow relationships, and suddenly here was someone who didn't play games. By month 3, we were inseparable. We moved in after a year. Emma had quirks. She alphabetized her spices, talked to plants, and hated loud chewing. But I loved those things. She made me feel seen, steady, and safe. And I like to think I gave her the same. We didn't fight often. When we did, it was soft and circular. She'd go quiet. I'd try too hard to fix it. Eventually, we'd meet in the middle. That's what I thought love was: negotiation, forgiveness, showing up even when it's hard. I proposed on a hike overlooking Boulder Canyon. She said yes before I even got the full sentence out. We cried, we kissed. I carried the ring box in my sock for 2 miles back down the trail because I couldn't stop smiling like an idiot. Then came the planning. That's when the cracks started to show. Stacy, Emma's best friend since college, became omnipresent. She was at every tasting, every fitting, every planning session. She had opinions about everything: venue, menu, flowers, playlist. I didn't mind at first. I figured she was just excited. But it didn't take long before it felt like I was marrying both of them. Stacy never liked me. That much was clear from day one. She smiled with her mouth, not her eyes. She made jokes at my expense, subtle digs disguised as sarcasm. I'd walk into a room and feel her sizing me up like a threat. I told Emma once, early on, I think Stacy doesn't really like me. She brushed it off. She's just protective. Once she gets to know you, she'll come around. Never did. Instead, she inserted herself into every corner of our lives. Sometimes I'd wake up on a Saturday expecting a lazy morning with my fiance, only to find Stacy already on our couch, sipping coffee, talking loudly about some dating disaster or work drama. Emma would roll her eyes but laugh along. I'd smile, but inside, it grated on me. After the wedding, where, yes, Stacy demanded a special walk down the aisle because she'd been Emma's rock, things didn't settle. They escalated. Emma started making plans without checking in. I already told Stacy we'd meet her for drinks, or Stacy thinks we should try that new Thai place instead. At first, I chalked it up to habit. They were close, I got that. But over time, it started to feel less like we were married and more like I was intruding on their relationship. And every time I tried to talk to Emma about it, gently, respectfully, it turned into a fight. She's my best friend. I can't just cut her off. You're overreacting. So I backed off because that's what I'd always done. I chose peace. I told myself it wasn't worth the fight, that Emma loved me and that should be enough. But love isn't just about feeling, it's about prioritizing, protecting, drawing lines in the sand when someone disrespects your partner. Emma never drew that line, and Stacy kept crossing it. Still, I stayed because I believed in our story, because I thought eventually Emma would see it, see me, that one day she'd recognize the slow erosion of boundaries for what it was, sabotage. But the day she believed Stacy's lie without a second thought, that's when I realized something. It wasn't just Stacy who betrayed me. Emma did too. The beginning of the end didn't come with a bang. It crept in quietly through little compromises, missed moments, and the ever-growing presence of Stacy. It started on a Friday. Emma and I had planned a night in tacos, movies, no distractions. We'd both had long weeks, and I was actually looking forward to just being together. I was chopping onions when the doorbell rang. Emma got it, and within seconds I heard the sobbing. Stacy? She stumbled in like a storm cloud, clutching a duffel bag and crying into Emma's shoulder. "He left me," she wailed. "I can't do this alone." I stayed in the kitchen, wiping my hands, already knowing what was coming. Emma turned to me, her face caught between concern and hesitation. "Is it okay if she stays here a few days? Just until she figures things out?" What was I supposed to say? No. So I said, of course, and gave Stacy a tight smile. A few days turned into a week, then two. Stacy took over the guest room, then the living room, then the kitchen. She left dishes everywhere, blasted reality shows at full volume, and used our things without asking. One afternoon, I came home to find her painting on our patio, my power drill and saw scattered around like toys. When I confronted her, she shrugged. My therapist said creative expression helps me cope. I brought it up with Emma, calmly, clearly. I know she's hurting, but this is getting out of hand. Emma rubbed her temples. She doesn't have anywhere else to go. I feel like she has parents, other friends. She said they wouldn't understand. Of course she did. Stacy always knew how to frame things, so Emma felt responsible for her. That's what pissed me off the most. It wasn't just the inconvenience, it was how she manipulated Emma into thinking any boundary was a betrayal. One night, I snapped. After finding dirty dishes in the sink for the 5th morning in a row, I told Emma, "This isn't sustainable, she needs to go." Emma looked torn, but to her credit, she didn't immediately fold. She promised to talk to Stacy. What happened next still makes my blood boil. Stacy flipped it, made herself the victim. "If my presence is such a burden, I'll leave," she said through crocodile tears. "I didn't realize your home had conditions." Emma tried to reassure her. "It's not like that." But the damage was done once again. I was the bad guy. Eventually, I forced the issue. I sat them both down and said, "We've supported you through a rough time, Stacy, but it's been a month. It's time to find another place to stay." Stacy stared at me like I'd slapped her. "You're unbelievable." Emma didn't defend me, but she didn't stop me either. Stacy left in a storm of sighs and slammed doors. I thought we'd turned a corner, that Emma and I could finally breathe again. I was wrong. The real betrayal came weeks later. Emma came home from brunch with Stacy, tense, silent, eyes avoiding mine. When I asked what was wrong, she said nothing. That night, she moved into the guest room. The next morning, she asked, "Were you with someone else yesterday?" The question hit me like a punch. What? No. Stacy said she saw you at that strip mall near Maine in your car with some woman. I blinked. I was there buying groceries alone. She described your car, your jacket, because she saw me, but she didn't see anything else because there was nothing else. Emma stared at the floor. I don't know what to believe. That sentence broke something in me. 6 years together, 2 years married, and she didn't even ask me before accusing me of cheating. She moved out a few days later. I got a text from her the next morning. I think we should separate. My lawyer will be in touch. No conversation, no explanation, just silence. And Stacy, she got exactly what she wanted. The first night Emma was gone, I sat on the couch for hours, staring at nothing. She hadn't taken much, just enough to make a statement. A suitcase, some toiletries, a few changes of clothes. But the apartment felt gutted, like she'd taken all the warmth with her. The silence was oppressive, and it wasn't just the quiet of an empty room. It was the silence of absence, of judgment, of someone deciding you're guilty without a trial. I didn't sleep that night. I just lay there in our bed, my bed now, listening to the wind whip against the windows and wondering how the hell I ended up here. The next morning, I found her note. Not a letter, just a short, cold message scribbled on a torn piece of paper. I need space. Please don't contact me right now. I didn't know whether to laugh or scream. Space? After 6 years together? After everything we'd built? After one accusation she didn't even bother verifying? I went to work that day, but I wasn't really present. I sat through meetings and nodded when appropriate, but my mind kept circling back to the same question. How could she believe Stacy over me? The anger came slowly, like a tide. At first, I blamed myself. Maybe I hadn't shown her enough affection lately. Maybe I hadn't done enough to make her feel secure. But then I remembered the look in her eyes when she accused me, how quickly she turned cold, how she didn't ask, didn't consider, didn't care. That's when the sadness hit. And it hit hard. The apartment became a prison. Every room held a memory. She laughed in the kitchen while she tried to flip pancakes. Her perfume lingered in the hallway. Her half-finished novel is on the nightstand. I couldn't escape her, even though she'd already escaped me. Days passed, then weeks. I said she didn't call, didn't text. I didn't even check in. But Stacy, she was busy. I started hearing from mutual friends, little things at first. Awkward questions and vague comments. One buddy texted, "Hey man, you doing okay?" Heard things got messy. I asked what he meant, and he just replied, "Never mind, just checking in." Eventually, the whispers got louder. Apparently, Stacy had told people I'd cheated, that Emma had caught me with someone else. She was devastated, heartbroken, and blindsided. None of it was true, but it didn't matter. People believed it because that's how gossip works. Truth takes the stairs, lies take the elevator. Friends stopped calling. My family started asking uncomfortable questions. My sister even asked if I'd been acting distant toward the end. Everyone was trying to piece together a puzzle based on a false image. And Emma, she let them believe it. That hurt more than anything. If she'd stood up for me, if she'd just said, "I don't know what happened yet," it would have meant something, but she let the narrative spread. She handed Stacy the microphone and walked off stage. At night, I couldn't sleep. I'd lie awake for hours, playing conversations over in my head, things I should have said, things I never got to say. I kept wondering, did she ever love me, or was it all just convenient? I started losing weight, not on purpose. Food just didn't taste like anything. I'd open the fridge, stare at leftovers, then close it again. Even the coffee tasted bitter. I deleted social media. I couldn't stand seeing the comments, the photos, the subtle digs. One mutual friend posted a cryptic status about men who pretend to be loyal. Another shared a meme about betrayal with a broken heart emoji. They weren't subtle, and I wasn't stupid. I started seeing a therapist. I didn't know what else to do. I felt like I was spiraling, like my grip on reality was slipping. One session turned into 2, then 4. I found myself opening up more than I expected. I told her about Emma, about Stacy, about the cheating accusation, about how fast it all fell apart. The therapist, Dr. Levy, was calm and composed, but blunt. "You're grieving a loss. she said, but not just the loss of a person, the loss of trust, of certainty, of who you thought she was. It hit me harder than I expected because she was right. It wasn't just that Emma left, it was that she'd left without asking, without fighting, without even looking back. She didn't trust me, and that truth was impossible to unlearn. After a month, the fog started to lift, not completely, but enough to see the outlines of what came next. I stopped waiting for her call. I stopped checking my phone at night. I even started putting the apartment back together, rearranging furniture, donating old things, and repainting the walls. It wasn't about erasing her. It was about reclaiming something that used to be mine, my life. Because if Emma could walk away from our marriage without a single conversation, then maybe she wasn't the person I thought she was. Maybe I'd spent years trying to prove myself to someone who never saw me clearly to begin with. And that's when I stopped blaming Stacy, not because she wasn't guilty, but because the real betrayal came from Emma. She made the choice. No, I had to live with mine. It started with a text message I almost ignored. I was walking out of the grocery store, my arms full of paper bags and my head still in that half-numb space I'd been living in for weeks. Then my phone buzzed. Unknown number. Normally I'd let it go, but some instinct made me swipe it open. Hey, this is Marissa. I know we've only met once or twice, but I used to be close with Stacy. I have something I think you should see. I stop in the middle of the sidewalk, rereading it 3 times before responding. What do you mean? She replied almost instantly. It's about what Stacy said, about you cheating. She lied. I have proof. For a second, I just stood there, heart pounding. Cars passed, people moved around me, but the noise faded to static. She lied. I met Marissa that evening at a coffee shop near downtown. She was already there when I walked in. Nervous, fidgety, holding her phone like it was a grenade. She didn't waste time. Look, she said, handing it to me, I saved everything. And she had. Stacy's messages were all there, texts bragging about how she planted the seed in Emma's mind, laughing about how quickly she believed it. She didn't even ask him, one text said, just walked out. Guess I was right about her being too trusting. Another, he thinks he's so perfect, so in control. Watch how fast I blow this up. It was like reading a confession from someone who'd burned my life down for sport. I felt sick. She said all this? I asked, my voice hoarse. Marissa nodded, her expression tight with guilt. I didn't know she was that cruel. At first, I thought maybe she misunderstood something, but then she started mocking Emma too, saying she was pathetic for not seeing through you. That's when I knew she was just malicious. I scrolled in silence. The messages were worse than I expected. Stacy hadn't just lied. She took pride in it, as if tearing apart a marriage was some kind of power move. Why are you showing me this now? I asked finally. Marissa hesitated. Because I should have sooner. Because you deserve to know the truth. And because, honestly, I couldn't sleep knowing I let her get away with this. Thanked her. I took screenshots. I asked if she'd be willing to make a statement if needed. She didn't even hesitate, absolutely. When I got home, I sat on the couch with my phone in my lap, staring at the proof. I didn't cry. I didn't yell. I didn't even move for a long time. The anger had burned itself out weeks ago. What I felt now was colder, sharper, like steel cooling in a forge. I'd been walking around in a fog, ashamed, broken, doubting myself. And for what? A lie? A calculated, venomous lie from someone who never wanted to see me happy. Stacy hadn't just told a story, she'd orchestrated a hit. And Emma had believed it, without hesitation, without a question. That night, I didn't call Emma. I didn't forward the screenshots. I didn't give her the satisfaction of being the first to know. Instead, I called my lawyer. I have something, I said. Proof that what Stacy said was a lie. Let's meet tomorrow. We scheduled an appointment. I sent the files. I started a folder because now this wasn't about saving my marriage. It wasn't about winning her back. It was about clearing my name. I couldn't undo the silence, the loneliness, the nights spent questioning my own worth, but I could, at the very least, reclaim the truth. Let them talk. Let the gossip swirl. This time, I had facts, and that was enough to start rebuilding from. The park looked smaller than I remembered, maybe because everything had changed since the last time we were here. Back then, we'd held hands walking this path, talked about getting a dog, laughed over ice cream, and argued about which movie to watch next. Back then, we were a team, flawed but intact. Today, it felt like I was meeting a stranger who used to live inside the woman I loved. Emma was already there when I arrived. She stood under the same sycamore tree where we'd taken our engagement photos, dressed in a muted blue coat, arms crossed tight against her chest like she was bracing for a storm. Her face was pale, tired, defensive. She didn't smile, didn't say hi, just looked at me with that guarded, distant expression that used to make my stomach twist. The one she'd worn the day she packed a bag and told me she needed space. I approached slowly, phone in hand. "I'm not here to argue," I said. Her voice was clipped. "Then why are we here?" "Because you need to see something." I handed her the phone. The screenshots were already open. Marissa's messages, Stacy's bragging texts, every lie wrapped in cruel little bows. Emma looked at the screen, hesitated, then began to scroll. At first, her expression didn't change, but by the third message, her brow furrowed, her jaw clenched. By the time she reached the one where Stacy called her gullible, I saw the shift, the crack in her armor. Her lips moved, reading silently. Her eyes widened, and then her hand went limp, the phone nearly sliding to the ground. "She lied," she said, voice barely above a whisper. "Yes," I said. "From the beginning." Emma sat down hard on the bench behind her. For a moment, she didn't speak, just stared at the phone in her lap like it was a bomb that had already gone off. "I trusted her," she whispered. "I thought she was trying to protect me." Nodded, "And you believed her without question. You didn't even ask me if it was true." Emma's eyes filled with tears. "I was scared. I felt sick when she told me. I didn't want it to be real, but she was so detailed, so certain, and I couldn't breathe. I felt like the floor dropped out from under me." "So you ran," I said, sitting beside her. "You didn't ask, you didn't confront me, you didn't give me a chance." She nodded slowly. "I didn't, and I've regretted it every day since." I looked out across the park, families, couples, joggers, all oblivious to the wreckage sitting on this bench. I, I didn't cheat on you, Emma. I never even came close. And for you to think that, for you to believe someone like Stacy over me, as she covered her mouth, tears spilling over. "I'm sorry. I'm not here for an apology," I said. "I'm here because I needed you to know the truth. You ended our marriage based on a lie, and you need to live with that." "I want to fix this," she said suddenly. "I'll cut Stacy off. I already have, really. I'll do therapy. We can go together. Please, don't let this be the end." Her voice broke on the last word. It was the first time she'd looked at me like the woman I married, open, raw, hurting. And for a split second, I felt the urge to reach for her hand, but it passed because the damage was done. "You left," I said, "without a conversation, without a fight. You threw away 6 years because one person told you one lie." "I didn't know what to believe," she sobbed. "I panicked." "And I paid for it," I said. Silence settled between us. I stood. "I'm not angry anymore, Emma, not really. I'm tired. I've made peace with the fact that we're over. I just wanted you to know the truth, so when you think back on this, you'll remember who walked away first and why." She stood too, wiping her cheeks. So that's it? That's it, I said. There's nothing left to fix. You made your choice. Now I'm making mine. Her lip trembled. I still love you. I didn't say it back. Because even if part of me still loved her, the rest of me knew love without trust was a ticking bomb, and I was done living in fear of when it might explode. Take care of yourself, I said. And then I walked away. No begging, no bargaining, no looking back. Truth has a way of echoing long after it's spoken. I didn't expect things to shift so quickly after I showed Emma the screenshots. In fact, I wasn't expecting much of anything. I had no interest in fixing what was broken, no appetite for revenge. I thought the moment I walked away from her on that cold park bench, that would be the end of it. But it wasn't. Because truth, real, undeniable truth, spreads on its own. It started a few days later. I was in the middle of a late grocery run, just tossing basics into the cart, when my phone buzzed. Hey, I saw the messages from Stacy. I'm really sorry. I didn't know. The name on the screen was someone I hadn't heard from in months, a mutual friend who had gone suspiciously quiet after the separation. I stared at it for a moment, heart thudding with a weird mix of surprise and exhaustion. So she told people, Emma, part of me had assumed she'd sit with the truth in silence, that shame would keep her from doing anything more. But apparently she'd started sending the screenshots to friends, family, anyone who had been fed Stacy's version of the story. I didn't reach out, I didn't say thank you, but the effects were immediate. The apologies started rolling in. Some were heartfelt, long paragraphs filled with guilt and regret. Others were vague and awkward, like people dipping their toes back into my life, unsure if they were still welcome. I didn't respond to most, because here's the thing. They had their chance. When everything went down, they could have asked questions, could have given me the benefit of the doubt, but they didn't. They pulled away, they looked at me like I was trash. They believed the lie without a second thought. And now that the tide had turned, they wanted to come crawling back? No thanks. I wasn't interested in rebuilding bridges that had burned themselves. But while my social circle was awkwardly realigning itself, Stacy's was imploding. Marissa hadn't just sent the texts to Emma. She'd sent them to others too. People Stacy had known for years, and those people weren't kind. Screenshots made their way into group chats. Old friends turned cold. Some confronted her outright, calling her manipulative, cruel, and unstable. Others simply ghosted her. She tried to play it off at first, claimed it was all a joke, that people were taking it out of context, that she was venting, not scheming, but no one was buying it. Because jokes don't come with that much glee. They don't include lines like, she actually believed me, LOL, poor idiot. The backlash was fast and brutal. I didn't go looking for it, but mutual friends kept me in the loop, out of guilt maybe, or curiosity, or just that irresistible human impulse to keep watching a train wreck in motion. One messaged me, dude, you won't believe this. Stacy's been blacklisted from the wine night group. Someone confronted her last night and she lost it, threw her drink, called everyone fake. Another C spiraling hard, posting on her stories like she's the victim. I checked once through an alt account, and sure enough, there she was, ranting on social media about betrayal, about people who can't handle the truth, about being misunderstood and burned for trying to help a friend. It was pitiful. Worse than pitiful. It was exactly who she'd always been, dramatic, self-serving, and utterly incapable of reflection. And then came the final twist. Stacy got fired. Apparently, the toxicity that had destroyed my marriage wasn't confined to her personal life. Word of her manipulative behavior had reached her workplace. People started avoiding her. HR got wind of it. There were rumors of her blowing up at someone during a meeting, and accusations of hostile energy. Whatever it was enough. She was let go within the month. The official reason? Interpersonal incompatibility. unofficially, karma. When I got the message from a friend who still worked there, I didn't feel joy, no vindication, no smug satisfaction. I just felt still, like something had finally settled. Meanwhile, Emma's world was cracking open. She moved back in with her parents. I only knew because her mom, who had never liked Stacy, apparently lost it when she found out what really happened. One mutual friend told me about the confrontation, about how her mom screamed in the driveway, "You destroyed your marriage because of that woman? How could you be so damn gullible?" Harsh, but not untrue. Emma tried to reach out once more, sent a long message apologizing again. This time, she didn't ask to fix things, just said she was sorry for letting fear cloud her judgment, that she hoped someday I'd forgive her, not for her, but for my own peace. I didn't reply, not because I hated her, but because I couldn't keep holding space for someone who didn't hold it for me when it mattered. She made a choice, and she had to live with it, just like I had to live with the pieces she left behind. But the difference was I was building again, possibly quietly. And this time, I wasn't letting anyone like Stacy anywhere near the foundation. Rebuilding wasn't some movie montage. There were no upbeat songs, no sudden moments of catharsis, no big cinematic turnarounds. It was quiet, incremental, the kind of work that doesn't impress anyone on Instagram, but it was real, and it saved me. After Emma and I had that final conversation, after I walked away and she didn't stop me, I expected to feel shattered. I thought I'd collapse under the weight of it all, but instead, there was just stillness, a terrifying kind of quiet, like standing in the ruins of something you spent years building. No more shouting, no more doubt, just dust and silence. And in that silence, something unexpected happened. I started breathing again. The first thing I did was clean the apartment. I mean, really clean it, top to bottom. I threw out anything that reminded me of the life we used to have, the photos, the gifts, the notes, the random little keepsakes we'd picked up on trips. It felt brutal at first, like erasing evidence of a crime I didn't commit, but it was necessary. Then I started rearranging the furniture. I moved the couch, got a new rug, put my books in the living room instead of the office, bought a few plants, reclaimed the space, made it mine. It was therapy without words. My morning routine changed too. I started waking up earlier, not out of anxiety, but because I wanted to. I'd sit on the balcony with a cup of black coffee wrapped in a hoodie, watching the sunrise burn off the fog. Sometimes I brought a book. Sometimes I just sat and let the silence settle around me like armor. It wasn't glamorous. It wasn't loud, but for the first time in months, I felt safe inside my own skin. Work became a refuge too. I threw myself into it not to escape, but to rebuild a sense of purpose. I volunteered for projects, helped a junior colleague navigate her promotion track, even stayed late a few times, not because I had to, but because I wanted to. And people noticed. My boss pulled me aside one afternoon and said, "You've stepped up lately. If you're interested in a bigger role, we should talk." I didn't smile, I nodded, but inside something flickered to life, something like pride. That Friday, I went home and cooked dinner for myself, not takeout, not a microwave meal, real food, steak, vegetables, and a glass of red wine. I played jazz on my speakers and ate at the table like a human being again. It was the first time in ages I felt like I deserved that. On weekends, I spent more time with my brother and his kids. He was one of the few people who never once doubted me, even when the rumors swirled. He told me early on, "I don't need proof to believe you, man. I know who you are." That stuck with me. We watched football, grilled burgers in his backyard, and took his boys to the park. And for a few hours each time, I forgot about the wreckage. I laughed. I I stopped drinking for a bit, not because I had a problem, but because I didn't want to blur anything anymore. I wanted to feel everything, the pain, the grief, the strange peace that followed. It hurt, sure, but it was honest. And that mattered more than comfort. There were nights I still lay awake, staring at the ceiling, wondering how it all went so wrong. But those nights grew fewer, the quiet got less heavy. Then, one random Thursday, I ran into Marissa again. Same coffee shop, same window seat. She recognized me first and waved. We talked for half an hour about books, work, life, after chaos. There was no tension, no awkwardness, just two people who'd walked through fire and come out a little wiser. I didn't ask for her number, she didn't offer it, and yet I left that coffee shop with a strange, quiet hope. Not for romance, necessarily, but for the idea that maybe, just maybe, life still had beautiful surprises waiting. I'm not in a rush to fall in love again. That's not where my heart is. What I want now is something deeper, stability, honesty, peace. And I've learned you don't get that by chasing what you lost. You build it day by day, brick by brick. Emma, she's a closed chapter. I don't hate her. I don't wish her pain, but I won't open the door again, no matter how many times she knocks. Stacy, she's her own downfall. She crafted her lie, watched it burn through people's lives, and now she gets to live with the ashes. As for me, I've got a new bookshelf filled with stories I want to read, a running trail I've started hitting twice a week, friends who actually show up, mornings that start with peace, not panic. I didn't seek revenge. I reclaimed my life. And that, I've realized, is the loudest victory of all. A few weeks later, I joined a book club. It was small, just 6 people, meeting at a local library once a month. I didn't say much at the first meeting. I mostly listened and took in the way people laughed, debated, and shared what the story meant to them. It felt strange to be in a room where no one knew anything about my past. No one was tiptoeing around gossiping or trying to read between the lines. I was just another guy with a library card and an opinion about fiction. It felt good to be anonymous. By the third meeting, I was actually looking forward to it. There is this one woman, Julia, smart, witty, deeply thoughtful. She always had a fresh perspective. We ended up walking out of the library together after one session and stood in the parking lot for over an hour talking about a passage from the book and somehow spiraling into our own philosophies about second chances. I didn't ask her out, but I thought about it. That's how I knew I was healing. Not because I wanted to fill the space Emma left, but because the ache had stopped being a wound and started feeling more like a scar, a reminder, not a cage. Some nights I still replay things, not to dwell, just to remind myself how far I've come. I think about the man I was during those worst days, silent, confused, wrecked, and I barely recognize him. He was trying to hold on. I'm trying to let go, and there's something beautiful about that shift. One afternoon, while cleaning out an old drawer, I found our wedding album. I stared at it for a long time. My first instinct was to toss it, burn it even. But instead, I closed it, wrapped it in a towel, and stored it in a box in the garage. Not everything needs to be destroyed. Some things just need to be put away. Out of sight, out of reach, out of the heart. This chapter of my life, this quiet, resilient rebuilding, it's not flashy, but it's mine, and it's enough. It happened a few months after everything had quieted down. I was at the grocery store, of all places, just picking up coffee and eggs, when I saw her, Emma. She was walking out of the floral section, holding a small bouquet of daisies and looking nothing like the woman I used to know. There was a heaviness to her, not physical. She was still as petite and graceful as ever, but in the way her shoulders drooped, in the way her eyes flicked across the aisle and landed on me. For a second, neither of us moved. Then she approached. "Hi," she said quietly, almost like she wasn't sure if she had the right. "Hi," I echoed, nodding politely. We stood there in awkward silence, the overhead hum of fluorescent lights filling the space between us. She looked like she wanted to say 100 things, but didn't know where to start. "I saw Marissa the other day," she finally said. I didn't respond. If she told me you're doing better, that you're happy, I gave a small shrug. "I'm rebuilding, that counts." Emma smiled faintly, but it didn't reach her eyes. "I'm sorry, again, I know I've said it before, but you don't have to," I cut in gently but firmly. "You've said it, I heard it, it's done." She looked down at the daisies in her hand like they might whisper a better response. "Do you hate me?" she asked after a beat. That caught me off guard, not because of the question, but because of how much I didn't need to answer it. "No," I said, "but I don't need you anymore. That's not hate, that's peace." Emma's eyes glistened, and for a moment, I saw the weight of all her choices resting on her shoulders. She wanted to ask for another chance. I could feel it, but she didn't. Maybe because she finally understood what it cost me. Maybe because she could see I wasn't the same man she left. We said goodbye without words, just a nod, a small, sad smile, and then we walked away. I never saw her again. Months passed. Life kept moving. Work, runs, book club, the quiet routines that stitched together a new kind of joy. I saw Marissa sometimes, still at the coffee shop. We never talked about the past, just books, weekend plans, funny things we'd overheard. I liked that. One night I sat on my balcony, looking out at the lights of Denver and realized something. My story, didn't end with betrayal, or divorce, or even truth. It ended with choice. My choice to heal, to grow, to reclaim the space that someone else tried to burn down. And in doing that, I found something better than revenge. I found myself. I used to think closure came with answers, that if I could just understand why Emma believed Stacy so quickly or why Stacy hated me so deeply, I'd be free. But it doesn't work like that. Some questions don't have answers. Some people aren't worth the search. Closure isn't clarity, it's acceptance. And in that acceptance, I stopped waiting for apologies, stopped hoping people would change, and stopped needing to be understood by those who never truly saw me. Started choosing myself. That's the real ending. Not dramatic, not loud, just quietly powerful. Just enough.